everyone and welcome back to the Warhammer 3 newsroom. I'm COLONELDAMNEDERS and today we're back with the Nurgle faction mechanics. Really quickly before we get started, if you want to decide what guides to see first when we get our hands on Warhammer 3, then head on over to the Discord via the link in the description and vote on the poll before release date. Okay, we have a lot of mechanics to get through, so let's waste no more time and dive right in. Now first things first, death and rebirth. Nurgle is the chaos god of all things deathly and plaguey, but he also has a strong sense of rebirth and the cyclical nature of life. Nurgle's faction reflects this by growing their settlements in a very particular way. Each building you create in your settlements will go through a life cycle from their lowest tier to their highest before looping back around again, and this all happens over a number of turns, with no interaction needed from the player. Each tier has different effects and units added to the recruitment pool, which is also incredibly different to normal buildings. Building and recruitment building adds a unit of that type to the pool, and each stage of the growth cycle will add more units to the pool, in theory allowing you to recruit a full stack all at once if you let it add up. These cycle effects can be things such as increasing the income as well as containing multiple units, meaning one building can provide capacity for many units in each cycle. So once you have all these units added to your pool, you don't have to recruit them over several turns like most factions. Instead, you summon demons directly into your army, but not at full strength, meaning they must spend a little time replenishing before you go forth and conquer. The replenishment is another thing that can be improved with skills and tech to get you moving faster. Recruitment can be done in any friendly or neutral territory, meaning you basically have global recruitment by default, which will make Nurgle very difficult to pin down. Now there are caps to each unit and how many of them you can have in the recruitment pool at once, but once you get to that late game, you should be filling your armies at a very rapid rate. Now these effects extend to non-military buildings, with each of them changing their effects each cycle as well as creating Nurglings as a byproduct. There are also technologies, buildings and plagues that can decrease the time between cycles, meaning you can farm these effects much quicker. This all boils down to an easier to manage settlement system once they get going, but they take a little extra effort to get going in the first place. Moving on to plagues and infections now, of course it just wouldn't be Nurgle if he didn't have something to do with disease. Everything in his factions are plague spreaders, so you'll be crafting and spreading your own across your empire, as well as those of your enemies. It all starts in the Plague Cauldron, which is a dedicated screen where you can concoct various plagues using a combination of bases and symptoms you have unlocked. There are a lot of options, but all we know for now is that the bad effects generally affect your enemies, whereas good ones affect you. All plagues grant you additional infections and Nurgle corruption every time they spread, and we have 5 starter plague bases to give us a taste of what they can do. Pox decreases the cycle time for friendly buildings and increases growth. Buboes reduces replenishment rate and increases attrition whilst under siege for enemies. Agu applies attrition to enemy armies and reduces their campaign move range. Rot adds units of Nurglings to your recruitment pool at the cost of no infections. And Palsy reduces the melee attack of enemy armies. A plague is built from one of these bases and then 2 additional symptoms, and distribution can be done in one of 2 ways, directly or using plague cultists. Directly can only spread to friendly settlements or armies and results in a reduced cost of infections. Infections are gathered from spreading plagues, post-battle events, dilemmas and so on, and each symptom increases a plague cost by a certain amount. Plague cultists are hero units which exist solely to spread the plague to neutral or enemy armies or settlements. They cost more to create, but there is no stopping their infection once they reach their target, and upon spreading the plague, they are destroyed. Only one plague can affect anything at one time, meaning you cannot stack up these effects, and of course friendly AIs won't appreciate being plagued. Once a plague is in the world, it has a chance to spread between settlements and armies that are close by. Battles between armies will also spread the plagues between the two, and spreading plagues with particular bases unlocks you more symptoms, as well as through the tech tree. The plague spreading chance and the length they last is improvable via other means. The idea is to eventually have a ton of plagues spreading around the world and never dying out, so that no one can escape your touch, and they are constantly being slowed down. Once you have unlocked enough symptoms, you unlock powerful plague recipes, which are particularly strong, such as Nurgle's Rot or the Black Plague, that come with additional benefits to duration and spreading chance. Unholy manifestations and cults are next, and if you've watched the other Chaos videos, you should be familiar with these. The manifestations are gained as you reach a total amount of corruption worldwide, and these effects are Pestilent Growth at 0 corruption, which grants 20% replenishment rate to an army for 2 turns whilst disabling their movement. Blessing of Nurgle, which requires 1000 corruption and increases the chances of plague spreading in the local province by 30% for 3 turns, but disables campaign movement. Exponential growth, which requires 2000 corruption and increases growth locally by 20% and decreases recruitment cost by 20% for a target army for 3 turns. And Nurgle's Visitation, which requires 3000 corruption and after 3 turns grants a random plague to every army and settlement in the same province as the target army, whilst disabling campaign move range. As for the cults, his 4 buildings are Shelters, which grant 25 infections per turn, Refuges, which grant 40 per turn if growth is 200 or more in the region, Hospices, which grants 40 per turn if any lord is present, and Colonies, which give a random plague to the settlement but destroy the cult. And finally we come to the tech tree. Nurgle's tree is similar to Khorne's in the sense that there are several groups rather than one single main tree. Each pod contains a number of techs and you must research 4 before moving on to the next pod. As well as the usual suspects of unit upgrades, diplomacy, etc., several Nurgle techs improve plagues in various ways, such as new symptoms. There are also several techs which add spells to the Grey Unclean Ones, making them powerful casters as well as sexy lads. Speaking of magic, Nurgle has access to various army abilities unlocked via tech, and these can be charged based on how much damage units are taking. Each ability also targets a chain of enemies, meaning they will spread after you cast them on a single target. And finally, some techs take much longer than others, but it's all scaled around just how powerful each one is. And that is just about everything we have right now on Nurgle. Let me know in the comments below what you think of this and which your favourite mechanic is. Leave a like if you did and be sure to subscribe to be the first one to find out just how they play once we get our hands on the game next year. Consider checking out the merch at COLONELDAMNEDERS.store. We've got a very exciting announcement coming very soon. Also, consider becoming a supporter by being a member on YouTube, a patron on Patreon, or a subscriber on Twitch. Doing so gets you shout-outs like It's Your Boy LC for their support at that Unclean Ones tier. One more time, thank you for watching, and for now, I've been COLONELDAMNEDERS, and I will see you next turn.